Welcome back to News Hour. Make no mistake about it, the United States Fed has now moved in to save the euro. 6 central banks have opened the floodgates in order to shore up the troubled currency. The banks include England, Japan, Switzerland, and Canada. But let's face it, the real firepower is coming from the US Federal Reserve. This is how it'll work. The Fed will exchange US dollars for euros at a fixed exchange rate. In other words, if the euro crashes at a later date, the US Fed and you will be holding the can. Of course, the markets love the latest bailout. Here's what happened at this morning's opening bell.
Well, the opening bell is now ringing at the New York Stock Exchange, and you are expecting to see that sharp rise. European markets are up. The FTSE in London up 3%, the DAX up 4%, Paris is up a similar amount. And the reason, of course, the central banks, the Fed in Washington, the ECB in Frankfurt, the Swiss in Switzerland, and the Japanese central bank, all agreeing to add liquidity to the market. What they're actually doing is highly technical, and frankly, you and I don't need to talk about the details. Think of it as a motor, an engine, and what they are doing this morning is adding grease and oil to ensure that in the complex motor and engine of the global financial system, nothing gums up, nothing comes to a stop.
We love that CNN and Richard Quest don't think you need to know the details. What's also not mentioned by the Fed is just how many dollars are being offered. And as you'll recall, the Fed has been known to print trillions of dollars when they need to before, without being clear about who gets it and why.
Well, Congress is in a deadlock over tax and spending cuts. We learned the Fed secretly gave Wall Street banks over $7.7 trillion. Where did the Fed get that $7.7 trillion? They created most of it from nothing. Well, our government's a massive debt. The Fed picked winners and losers and secretly helped big banks tally record profits. Remember the great debate we had here over $700 billion in TARP funds? There was no debate over the $7.7 trillion the Fed gave the banks. Did Congress have a clue? There's another game going on way over our heads, and our constituents are struggling. Well, the banks, with the help of the Fed, have captured control of our government. Now the rating services are threatening us. If we don't come up with a deal, they'll downgrade U.S. debt. Could the threat to our national sovereignty be any clearer? It's time for Congress to listen to the wisdom of the founders, reclaim its constitutional primacy over monetary policy. There is a way. It's called the Need Act. The Fed takes our freedom and gives it to the banks. Let's take our freedom back from the Fed.
Greece and Italy have already ceded their democracies to central banks. They literally are no longer nation states. As Ron Paul likes to tell us, one of these days all these trillions and trillions of dollars that we keep loaning out to other people may come back to bite us. And then what? We'll be left beholden to our creditors that include China. You're watching NewsHour.